So a couple of announcements. One to remind you to post your revised forum post today from module 3, and just to say that I'm not looking for a complete overhaul. I feel like some of us may be overdoing either the original post or the revised post. I'm sorry I didn't get to your forum 2s yet, and I'm going to do that right after class. But just to remind you to do the revised post. It doesn't need to be crazy revisions, but I do want you to just get in the habit of trying to take words out or add words in. Secondly, we are going to look at what is going on this week to make sure that we are on the same page here. Okay, on Monday, today, there's 2 readings for just 1 reading notes entry. Both of the readings are pretty redundant, i.e. they kind of say the same thing, but in different ways. And I think some students like different readings for different reasons. So there is that to help us understand peer review. That's what we're going to go over in class today. On Wednesday, you're choosing one of those 3 essays on our Canvas page, which is under, if you go to modules and then go down to module 4, you're going to see project 1 rhetorical analysis and the project 1 workshop. Oh man, that date is wrong. Great, nice job. Nice job, me. The main thing we're going to be looking at today is project 1. So that's kind of the main focus of this week. And on Wednesday, I'm hoping that you read the article or choose one of the articles, read it, and take a good amount of reading notes over that article. Begin thinking about how you might structure or what you might say in your rhetorical analysis. And we're going to work on then planning and kind of beginning to draft your essay on Wednesday. On Friday, right now, I have no Zoom class scheduled to give you more time to do your peer review. And then the final draft of the essay is due on Monday, a week from today. Does that timeline make sense? Besides noting that the due date was listed at the wrong time for these 2 readings, so I'll just try to help us get through as much of what was important there. Okay. How good are we at working on teams? I'm going to stop the share here.
Teams like Microsoft Teams?
Oh, no, yeah, thank you. No, like with other human beings. Not the software. Like how are we like a really good team member or a so-so team member or a not so good team member? Or here's another way to ask the question. How good are we at offering feedback in teams when someone, has anybody been on a team when someone thinks they have a great idea and then they just act like there's no way their idea could be wrong, but their idea actually doesn't seem that good? And so someone on the team has to be like, so maybe we shouldn't do it that way because it's dumb, but that would not be a good way to say it, right? I want to slow down. We're doing peer review, and peer review is a way of thinking about how to offer constructive criticism to our peers in a way that's going to help all of us do as well as we can in our work. So that's kind of the main focus of today, and I hope by the end of today we have a better sense of some techniques and strategies we can use so that we can offer constructive criticism without upsetting people and while still being effective about doing that. So I really feel like our ability to give good feedback to our peers is one of these skills that is very translatable to the real world in all kinds of ways. Definitely if you're doing anything collaborative. Okay, so on that note, I am curious to just get us started. I want to know where we're coming from. We've all done peer review of some kind in the past, right? Where you trade papers or have like some kind of a project where you're getting and receiving feedback. This is, hopefully we've had that experience, and maybe that was just in high school. But I do want to do a peer, free write. How has your experience in peer revision been? What's been helpful or unhelpful in this process? What to do and what not to do when you're revising a peer's paper or offering any kind of feedback. So do you have any experience or some tips that you've noticed worked really well, or things that have happened with you in groups that have been bad? Um, so kind of what's been your experience with peer review and how has that worked for you? What's worked well and what has not worked well? And we're going to just go about 4 minutes on this free writing prompt, and I'm going to write with you as well. If that prompt doesn't work for you, I would rather just have you stay writing for 4 minutes than not write at all. So just write on whatever is on your mind if that prompt doesn't work. All right. Go ahead and finish what you're writing. And I'm going to keep us on this view and just take notes on my own and then share these notes with you after the fact. But what I would do in your notes or in a document is keep a do and don't list. So some of these are going to be like do this, don't do that. So they're going to be, you might go do and don't, do, don't, do, don't, or just have a big long list of things we should do and a big long list of things that we should not do. And I'm curious to hear. I've had mixed experiences with peer review. I feel like sometimes, and I remember just back to my days as a student that sometimes I would get really good feedback and other times I would not. So, but I'm curious, I want to draw on your experience before we get into mine. So, what do we say? What makes good peer review, or what makes peer review work or not work, and based on your experience?
I said when people like give feedback on how something like connects or if it clarifies or if it doesn't have like evidence or supports your thesis, not when it's like
Yeah.
it's spelled wrong or just like repeating words, because I feel like those are things you can distinguish when you're doing your own revision.
Good. That was one of the main big ones I was hoping we would get. I'm saying in my notes that we need to focus on revision, which is the big picture, not editing. So you're not telling your peers how to edit their work. You're telling your peers whether or not something doesn't make sense to you. Like if you get lost when you're reading, that's something to let them know. Or if you feel like they could make a connection a little clearer, or maybe present their ideas a little clearer because you're a little confused. You might think you kind of know what they're talking about, but you're not sure. That's all amazing. I do not want to see like editing suggestions, partially because this is supposed to be a shitty draft, right? At least not super polished. Fantastic. Thank you, Trevor. Other ones?
I just said that I feel like sometimes peers can be afraid to like be mean when giving criticism or feedback. So I feel like a lot of times I just don't get anything.
Yep.
And then I feel like I'm stuck.
You get the too nice feedback.
Mm-hmm.
That was the same thing.
Yeah, so good. I don't know what to tell you. Like, cool.
This is really great. If you just spend a little more time with it, I'm sure it'll be even better. I think students that write really good drafts, this is especially hard. And sometimes it's true, especially when we read a draft that seems really good, and we're like, I really don't know what to tell you. But I'm glad you put it that way. I don't want us to be mean to each other. In fact, that's the story that I have to tell you. I might as well tell that now. But I don't want us to be overly kind either. Right? There's a way to be constructive in our criticism. I'm actually going to save my story. Good. There's another thing that you kind of hinted at, that feedback, whether it's praise or criticism, that's not specific is not helpful. So it's one thing to tell someone good job. It's another thing to tell someone your intro paragraph told me everything your essay was going to be about. Nice essay map. By the way, if you're also making notes on the kinds of things I'm looking for when you write essays, this is one of them. Your intro paragraph, as much as possible, should outline everything I'm about to read as specifically as possible. And in general, where you start your composition is super important, right? So that's what I would spend time revising. Okay, good. Thank you, Ella. Great one. Other ones? When I was a GTA, I'll just tell the story then. When I was a GTA, I had I wasn't a GTA. I'm sorry. When I was helping other GTAs, I was mentoring a new professor. And the professor came in, or the instructor came in, and she was shaken. And I'm like, how's it going? And she's like, I had a horrible class. I'm like, what happened? He's like, well, it was our first peer review day. And I'm like, what happened? And she handed me this paper that she said the student came up to me after class in tears and wanted to, basically, she couldn't even tell me what was wrong because she was having a hard time speaking because she was so emotional, but she was just emotionally wrecked after this. Just look at the paper. And I look at this paper, this is back when we like wrote comments on the paper. and sat in the same rooms as each other and stuff. And this paper, it was the meanest I have ever, I couldn't imagine someone being meaner to another human being on a piece of paper. It was like they crossed out whole sections of the essay and said things like, where did you get this? Why are you doing this? Did you not understand the assignment? This really doesn't read well. I would really get rid of this. I would get rid of this. There wasn't one bit of praise. And then the end comment was really what did it. It said something like, this is so bad, I think I would just start from scratch again, but really you might want to consider dropping the class and getting into CO 130 instead of 150, because I'm not sure you're a good enough writer to get through this class, or you just don't understand what the assignment's asking for. In either case, you have a lot of work to do, something like that. And this young instructor was like, I don't know what to do. What would you do? I didn't even believe it. I was like, ay, ay, ay. First of all, in this example, who really has the problem? Who really can't write in the way that I want to define writing? Peer reviewer, right? Why? And that's what I told her to do. I'd be like, I would bring that one student that commented and let them know that that's not helpful, right?
Being a dick.
Yeah, okay, so on the notes, be nice, which means specific points of praise. Don't be a dick. In other words, just don't be mean to the person. That being said, we're in a good position to hear what Ella's saying, because this happens to me as well. I don't want you to just be nice because you don't want to hurt other people's feelings. And maybe we should just get an agreement in this class that we're not going to be too emotionally invested in any of the essays we write for CO300. And that the essays that we write are just drafts and we're just practicing. So if someone writes a terrible essay, that's kind of great. Good job on making this terrible. Maybe that's not what you should say. In fact, that's probably a bad joke. Okay, this brings me to my second point. How do we not, and this is from Straub if we read it, how do we avoid being a dick when we review other people's work? And this is not just for CO300. This is like when my buddy sends me 4 demos and says, hey, do you want to help me produce any of these songs? And I don't want to produce any of those songs because I don't like any of them. And he's my friend. Do I say, these songs are terrible? So how do we not be a dick? Deep thoughts with Sean Waters and CO300. There's practical ways to do this. Good. Carolyn says in the chat, I statements and not you, which is non-violent communication. So we could take classes on non-violent communication and say, when you tell me I'm terrible, I hear, no, that's another bad joke. So say, I think, yes, good. That's one way to look at it. How else do we not be a dick and still be critical of another person's work?
Compliment sandwich.
Yeah, okay, we could use a compliment sandwich. That's the easiest one. Compliment, criticism, compliment, which actually works remarkably well. We like to hear praise first. It's basically suggestions instead of orders is it. I would say respect. Respect the person with what they're doing. You can go a long way in offering. You can also ask questions instead of giving orders or telling. Do not rewrite your peer's paper. Do not tell them what to do. But this gets to be interesting because let's say they didn't say anything about the audience. And when we look at the assignment guidelines, it clearly says to talk about exigence, audience, and constraints. So if they didn't mention the audience, instead of saying you probably want to talk about audience because that's what the assignment sequence says, or that's what the assignment says. So there's a way of basically, it all comes down to what Aretha says. I almost wrote respecty, which is kind of cooler looking. Maybe they want to write, or maybe they just don't care about the essay, which is completely fine. So I guess that's kind of the main thing, that one of the main points from Straub's point is that it's hard to say exactly one way or the other when you give people this kind of feedback. You also can, you can introduce your work. So on the top of your essay, you could like give a, not a disclaimer, some instructions. I've seen students do this well. Like you can say at the top of your draft, hi peers, whoever reads this, you know what, I really don't like receiving criticism, but I do want to know what I did well. So would you just limit your comments to praise for me? I don't recommend it, but if you want to, that's fine. Or you could say, destroy this essay, right? Okay. So that goes, one of the main suggestions here is to just try to understand where your peers are coming from. As much as you can. Good. Other do's and don'ts or comments on any of that? Okay. In the text, it basically says, this is on page 124, that it's best for you to understand how you get started when in any kind of feedback. You need to understand what the purposes and goals of the feedback is, i.e. to get what the purposes and goals of the assignment is, to understand what the writer's interests and aims are and how that connects to the bigger work of the class or the job or the context that you're in, and understand the stage of drafting that you're in. So there's 4 things that you want to pay attention to. 1, the assignment itself. 2, the writer's goals. 3, the situation of the broader class. And 4, the stage of the drafting process. i.e., and this is not just for CO300. If someone gives you something to get feedback on, one of the best things you should say is, how far along are you? i.e., what type of feedback do you want? If my buddy sends me a song that he's been working 20 hours on, and he just wants me to comment on small things, it doesn't do anyone any good for me to be like, I would completely just rewrite this whole thing. Whereas if he sends me something that he's been working on for 20 minutes and says, hey man, what do you think about this? What parts should I keep or cut? Then I'm able to offer more deep criticism, if that makes sense, based on the stage of the draft. Okay, other things that we've seen. So we've got basically on our do and don'ts. Do, be kind, don't be a dick. Do, be specific, don't be vague. Do, focus on the big picture as much as possible, the things that are connecting, where they need more evidence, and don't focus on just the small details. We need to look at the assignment, but there's another easy one here. How many of us would like to get a good grade on this assignment? So everybody pretty much is probably in that boat. How many of us would like to use this as an assignment to get better at our writing skills? So now we have 2 goals that we can pretty much agree on. And so any comment we give to our peers should help them, A, get a better grade, and or B, just write better. There's a really cool phrase that I think applies to the broader economy we live in called giver's gain. It's worth taking notes on this. Has anybody seen this idea? Or guess what that means? If there's a giver's gain, what does that mean?
Like karma.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking of a more like, I guess karmas can be practical, but not just like you get like, there's a more like concrete. We don't need to believe in the law of intentional action, which is how the Buddha described karma. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Deductions, like donations being deducted from your taxes, like I don't know, it can either be giving in your own self-interest or finding some, either whether it be like praise or a monetary initiative or incentive, but like, I don't know. Generosity usually comes with a personal interest.
Yes. Are there situations where being generous and doing good work for other people relates in our own personal gain?
Especially with like performance activism right now.
Yeah, I would argue honestly, just in the economy in general, that when you do good things, especially, by the way, this is my mom's advice to advance in any organization, make your superior's job easier and they will notice you. Why? Because when it comes time for, basically, you do nice things for people, just not because you want something out of it, but because you just want to be nice, and that is recognized in our culture, I think. Secondly, the more practical one here is if you get good at giving other people feedback, you are building skills that you can use on your own work. If you read your peers' work carefully, you can steal stuff from them. Don't copy and paste, because the plagiarism checker gets that. But if you really like the idea that they did, like they're like, oh, right, they brought up the trophy case. That's a cool one. I'm going to use that in my essay as well. Or I like the way they did their intro. I'm going to use that as well. And when I go in there and I'm really like trying to help their paper, I'm building up skills that I can use in my own work. So this is a sense that you're really getting better at writing. I did want to ask that. Does anybody feel like your writing and reading is getting better already 3 weeks into this, if you've been doing it more intentionally? It's awesome. This about the slightly is really, I think, where we should be. I feel like if you really, really try to get better at reading everything, you'll see an improvement over the course of a semester. You'll really be like, oh, dang, that was fast. That used to take me longer. So that's good. That's where we're supposed to be. All right. Let's look at the assignment. The main thing that we really want to make sure is that we have an idea of what the assignment is asking for. And I'm going to skip down to the rubric. This again is under modules and then module 4, project 1. It's also on the assignments page. Looks like the 2 biggest categories are purpose and content and compelling and convincing. And then there's integration of source material, evidence, outline, organization and style, and appearance, which is MLA or APA, 10 points. Okay, the 2 biggest ones, purpose and content, all presentation requirements, whatever that is, are included and clearly articulated. It's focused on rhetorical analysis, not summary. Well, this is already kind of confusing. Demonstrates close and careful reading of the article. I don't know what this is, and I don't really know what this is, so I need to ask the instructor. Compelling and convincing. Presentation is appropriate to the target audiences. And is compelling and convincing. Demonstrates situational rhetorical awareness rooted in theory. Multiple short quotes and query Okay, I get that. What is this? Here, basically, here's the deal. You are looking for, your analysis should consider how effectively the author meets her situations, considering the text, which is the words on the page and how those words are strung together, the content, the ideas, who the author's writing to, what the problems or needs of that audience are and how they can solve those problems, and the constraints that the audience has. The constraints probably one of the most significant pages to refer back to in our text is page 30 to 31 that outlines that long list of constraints in Bitzer's theory. Beliefs, attitudes, documents, facts, so on and so forth. Your audience is your peers and instructor who have read the same article and are familiar with Bitzer, i.e. don't just summarize the article. You shouldn't explain Bitzer's theory because we've read it. So your thesis should directly answer the question, how well does the author fit the given or created rhetorical situation? How well does the writer compose an effective response to that situation? Does it meet the constraints and exigencies of the writer and the reader? To do this, your thesis and argument should reflect the consideration of the following. Exigencies, why is the author speaking out? What motivated the discourse? What creates a sense of urgency at the time of the writing? What's the problem or problems that need to be solved? Who are they reaching that might be able to solve those problems? What is, and this is interesting, when we're talking about the audience, it says values, beliefs that they share with the audience. Political, social, religious, or cultural worldviews, shared or not shared between the writer and the audience. Are they considerate, confrontational? How does this appear? Notice under the constraints that we see values, beliefs, worldviews, and the contextual world of the audience. How might the constraints affect the framing of the common ground between the readers and the writer? Notice that these are duplicates, and when you talk about the values and beliefs of the audience, you could put that in an audience section or in a constraints section. Consider the type of text. This is an article in the Atlantic or the New York Times. Okay, and then I'm asking 3 to 4 double-spaced pages in MLA format. Use the Microsoft Word template. I didn't know if you know that there's a template for MLA and APA inside Microsoft Word. So when you open up a Word document, you normally click on blank document. You can also click on MLA, or you can search for MLA or APA, and it will load up an MLA or APA paper that you can just change it'll already be formatted correctly. Okay. Questions on understanding the assignment?
Are we able to include do you not want us to include like a summary of what the article was about?
I do not want you to include a summary of what the article is about. We're assuming that that your peers have read the article and that the instructor has definitely read the article. I want to know, it's less what the article's about and how the article works. Who are they appealing to, and what are the values and beliefs that they're appealing to? What words do they use? Boring, lifeless, and dull appeals to our need for new and exciting experiences, which I want to have. I don't want a boring, lifeless, and dull experience. Great. Thank you for that question. I think that was Ian. Other questions?
Do you want us to use only the article that we read as our contextual evidence, or can we use like some of the other stuff we've been reading?
Excellent question, Maddie. You can use whatever you would like. You don't need to use outside sources. I think it says, it doesn't say. Great question. If you use outside sources, you can cite them, but you don't need to. Let's say you want to say that like Americans value making money. I don't expect you to find like a source for that. Yeah, it's a generalization, and some Americans don't care about that. So you might say a lot of Americans instead of all Americans. So it's not like this isn't a research essay, it's a thinking essay. Like I'm thinking how this essay fits into the situation it was written in. if you want to refer to specific aspects like the demographics of the Atlantic, like that Medium article that I posted earlier last week, you could use that and cite that if you wanted to. I think that would be excellent, but it's not required. I tried to pick articles that you wouldn't need to do any outside research to be able to write an excellent rhetorical analysis. Awesome question. Other questions?
I know you did this last class, but maybe could you go and could you just explain like super shortly about like considering the text again?
Yes, that's really good. So an analysis, and this connects to what an analysis actually means. So there's 2 steps to an analysis. Step one is breaking something down into its parts. And step 2 is connecting those parts to a big idea. So it's like how something works. So I'm going to analyze something. I need to break it into its parts. And then I also need to see how those parts connect back to what the thing is. So if I'm analyzing, like anything I'm analyzing, let's say I'm analyzing this text. I can look at the different parts of this text and see how this part connects to the big point of the text. So in Maschiotra, he's trying to get us to reconsider the hookup culture, or to encourage older people to start conversations with younger people about the hookup culture, right? When he uses the reference of hands on hips, that one little line, that part, connects to his bigger thing because it makes the audience feel nostalgic about the past. So what I would do, and I'm glad you asked this question, when you take notes, you can make notes about everything that stands out to you and then ask, how does this connect to the audience? How does this connect to exigence or problems that the audience has? How does this connect to the values, beliefs, time of the audience? So you just get these quotes, that's the text, and they're short quotes, and you have a lot of them in your notes. I can look at this one quote that says, whatever the quote says as the text, and ask, how does that connect to the audience? Well, it connects to the conservative value of this. And now I'm like kind of like seeing how the text connects to the purpose of the article or the audience's need. So like a little bit of text, the quote, how that connects to the audience, exigence or constraints is kind of what I'm hoping that you can see.
Okay, so we don't need like a distinguished paragraph for it. It's kind of like in our discussion post where we're getting quotes and then doing like describing why this quote shows this. That's already considering the text.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you.
That's a great question. I had a student say that basically what you're doing, you're not just reading between the lines, you're reading around the lines. So the article isn't happening in a vacuum. There's real people reading it, and those real people have real expectations and real needs. How does the text meet that? That's what you're doing. Other questions? That was a great one. Okay, there's a couple of other things we could consider. One is the length of the paper. 3 to 4 pages is actually pretty different, 900 to 1200 words. A student in an earlier class asked, is there a penalty if we go over that page limit? So I write a lot. What do you think my response was? Let's see how well you have gotten a read of me as a writing instructor so far.
It's better to go over because you can always edit things out.
Dang, well done. That was one of the things I said exactly. There's another thing. It's one word and it starts with a D.
Depends.
On what? What's in those 5 pages? If you write 5 pages and I can delete 3 of them and not lose any meaning, That's not good. Like I would say, why didn't you take the time to make this shorter on me? Like I'm already reading 70 of these pages. For the love of God, cut one down for me. But honestly, if it was me, I would overwrite this and then see what I can cut out, especially considering the rubric. It looks like purpose and content and compelling and convincing. Maybe if it's too long, it stops to be as compelling, but I don't think so. I feel like the more you put in there, almost the better, the way this looks to me. This is the part, this outline, organization, and style, that I want your writing to be clear, specific, and succinct. So you might lose some points on style if you go way over. So yeah, I think it depends. You can go over, and honestly, the 3 to 4 pages is a suggestion. I think that's how long it takes to do it well. Other questions? Can I use I in this paper? Yes, sure. Just remember that it's not really whether or not you liked the article. I was very kind of surprised so far with the Bitzer versus Vats, how often people said I liked Vats better because I could understand him better. It's not really surprising, actually. There's really good research to show that we believe things that are easier to understand. They asked people whether or not they believed a statement, and people's belief of a statement went down when the font became more difficult to read. That's crazy. Also, the more we hear something over and over again, the more likely we are to believe it. So if you just see the same thing over and over again, pretty soon your brain thinks it's true. That's how propaganda works. Crazy. Okay, point being, this isn't really about you. So you can say, like, I think that it's effective based on these things, which is fine. I don't really care whether or not you use I, basically. Other questions? Okay. Here's the list of do's and don'ts that I'm going to share, basically. And let's see. I do hope that you use your peer review process as a way to improve your own writing. That's a sense of giver's gain, not just in karma, but in the sense that you really are building up your skills in a way that's going to improve what you're doing. Understand the assignment. If questions come up between now and Wednesday, just bring them on Wednesday. We already understood the goals of the writers that you're going to be peer reviewing. But this is a really good thing to remember when you're outside of a class structure where the end goal isn't as clear cut. Understand the process and a bigger process, i.e. we're really actually working on, and then do give a mix of praise and criticism, offer comments in the margin. So as you go and at the end, focus on the big picture as much as you can. Remember that this is just a crappy draft, so it's okay to encourage them to maybe cut some language out or give them some examples of things you might cut out. But don't spend too much time editing. Let's talk about more things that are, what do you think I want? Let's talk about me. I'm going to be reading these. Ideally, you have a good sense of what I like and don't like as a reader before you give an essay to me, especially considering it says it's compelling and convincing is appropriate to the target audience. Let's be real, I'm the target audience. So what can you do to be more compelling and convincing? Or how would you write to me? What kinds of things might you consider? Here's one of the things I would say. I think it's less about me as a reader and more about the situation I'm in as a reader. Namely, that I have 71 essays that I'll be reading. If you were reading 70 of these essays, would it change the way you read it? And would you prioritize certain things over other things? I really like clear and specific topic sentences that let me know what I'm about to read. So if you can make my skimming and scanning go quicker and not make me find your best points. So I'll often tell students to unbury your best work, because it's like your really good points sometimes are buried in the essay. If you can unbury them, that is a good thing to do. Here's an example of a topic sentence. Masciotra considers constraints. That's good. Better, Masciotra considers constraints of an older conservative audience who believes that sex should wait for marriage. If I'm going to talk about this older audience and their beliefs in that topic sentence, let me know what that is. Same thing in the introductory paragraph. If you can kind of lay out all of your main ideas, like impress me in the introductory paragraph, be as specific and succinct as you can, that's going to go a long way in making me as a reader feel like you know what you're doing and that you've read and thought and revised your work, because that's hard to do. It's like your third draft to get a really tight, awesome intro paragraph. In fact, some writers say you should do that last once you know what your best points are. So you kind of write a really vague intro first, write your essay, go through your essay, find your very best points that you make, move those up, and then move those up as a preview. Yeah, we kind of talked about this. Critique the paper itself, not the person. Compliment sandwich. Ask questions if you can. Respect the freedom and autonomy of the writer. Don't tell them what to do. Don't criticize the person who wrote the paper. Don't rewrite the paper for them. Don't be mean. Don't be vague. Don't just offer small edits of their work while they're missing a big picture. And try to make sure we understand what's going on and ask questions if you don't. Whew, that was a lot. Do we agree that this is an important skill to have? Do we agree that human beings are difficult? We have the advantage in the sense that this is pretty low stakes environment. Like your rhetorical analysis essay for CO300 really isn't that big of a deal in the grand scheme of your life. So I hope you're not too stressed out about it. But I do think this is a great training ground to get better at helping people out and helping yourself out in return. Cool? All right, if anyone wants to talk about culture or anything else, constraints, or any questions? Any questions? All right, well, I feel like I just talked too much. So I hope this was helpful in what I'm looking for. All right. Bye.